Just it is starting. Здравствуйте.
Здравствуйте.
Andrei Martyanov, I'm very happy to have you on the chat. But first, someone wants to say hello.
Здравствуйте.
Здравствуйте.
Как у вас дела?
У нас очень хорошо дела. А как у вас?
Да все вроде бы хорошо. Как там Америка?
Да, ой, Америка разваливается, если честно говорить. Так что, вот.
Все
Ну, как
плохо?
сказать? По-разному. Плохо, да, плохо. Не очень хорошо, скажем так.
То есть
Вот.
перспективы так себе.
Да, перспективы так себе. Но, в принципе, они хорошие для Евразии, с другой стороны, из-за этого. То есть, вот так вот. Но Америка, да, я, в общем-то, вот сегодня я надеюсь, что с Пьеро будем говорить на эту тему.
Мгм.
а, что, в общем-то, ну, будущее уже все, покинуло Америку, тут тяжело будет. Так что вот
А
так.
вы давно переехали туда?
Ой, господи, 30 лет.
Не собираетесь уезжать?
Не, ну мы раздумывали, ну посмотрим. Вот. У нас уже тут все, дом, семья, как говорится, поэтому очень тяжело сниматься. Нам, как говорится, одного коллапса СССР было более чем достаточно, а тут еще вот через второй коллапс переживать. Ну, конечно, раздумывали, да.
А если будете возвращаться, то куда?
Ну, в Подмосковье, наверное. Вот. В Москву я не хочу. Я Москву не выдержу более 2 недель. Вот, то есть,
Согласна. Я из Москвы и тоже не очень люблю там находиться. Поэтому тоже уехала. А я желаю вам хорошего интервью. Всего
вам
доброго.
тоже. Всего
Спасибо.
доброго. До
Спасибо.
свидания.
So, for those who listen, you have this is your assignment. You have to translate what has been said, and so that will be a good lesson to start learning Russian. And that it's good for me as well. So, Andrei, thank you very much for your time. It
Oh, my
was
pleasure, Piero. It's my pleasure. Always a pleasure to be here.
it's the third time I interview you, and we're going to change topics. The first time was to and people are witnessed was like over a year ago. It was in April 2022, and you predicted, and I agreed basically that the situation right now in Ukraine would go the way it's going, and it's unfortunately a slaughter for a lot of young people and older
Yeah, it
people
is.
now. And the second time we interviewed was about the current state of military affair. In fact, I mentioned your work to Israeli historian, which I met again recently, Martin van Creveld. And
Yeah, I know. I heard of him. Yeah.
so he's interested to read your book. In fact, for this little story, when I had dinner with him recently during Easter, um, he changed his mind on the situation in Ukraine as well. He used to be, like many Western analysts, very much in the opposite opinion as you are, but he has changed his mind after 1 year. He came to, I think, reality. He's an honest guy. And it was, he's retired, he's not on media anymore, but it was interesting to see that a very bright and, of course, renowned historian admits that he can do a mistake and change his mind. But
Yeah,
today,
it's people change their minds. I do it all the time too, so
I do it after coffee.
yeah.
And today I wanted to speak with you about your book of 2017, I believe.
No, this is 2021.
2021, Disintegration. I just read it recently. Indicators on the coming American collapse. And what struck me, of course, when I read it is that I wrote a similar book, and we obviously come from extremely different backgrounds. And I wrote a book called Survive the Economic Collapse. But obviously, by economy and collapse, I mean mostly the American empire, of which, unfortunately, I am part of because I'm in Switzerland, and Switzerland is part of Europe, not the
Yeah.
EU, but Europe geographically, and Europe is under military occupation since 1945. And we have not been liberated like Russia did to Eastern Europe. We're still under occupation, political, cultural, and economical. And this is collapsing right now. And I was curious to see what led you from, you have such a different background than mine, what led you to come to these conclusions, and specifically what made you think of that, and what led you to write this book as a start.
Um, do not forget my background, and I'm not talking about just military background. Do not forget my Soviet background, and we have been extensively schooled in Marxism. And you have to understand, half of it, for example, like history of the party or scientific communism, was complete garbage, and we knew it. But remarkably, Marxist-Leninist philosophy, which have been taught, it was basically the course in philosophy with the slant toward Hegelian philosophy and the slant to what is called the dialectical materialism. And this is what is basically the background, which, by the way, many others used. They just didn't call it Marxism, but one of the greatest economic minds of our time, Mr. Michael Hudson, whom I am proud and privileged to call my acquaintance, he is, if you wish it, could be called Marxist, not in the sense of this cultural Marxism garbage which they preach, no, we're talking about economically. It doesn't mean that Marxist economic theory is correct in terms of what it proposed, but in terms of describing capitalism, it was perfect. I mean, it's applicable, and guess what? Because you're staying on the materialistic background, you do not operate with the virtual things. You understand the importance, for example, of the psychological warfare or cultural issues and things of this nature, but you always look at the materialistic part of the issue. And materialist part of the issue is what and how much you produce and how it affects the material essence of the mode of production. It affects cultural, social, and military life. And when you look attentively what was happening with the United States since this birth of this mythology of the Gulf War 1.0, and then the economy, which was basically deindustrialization, you begin to scratch your head, and then at some point of time you say, you know what? Russians have this proverb, your wife should know. And the proverb says this: everything they told about the communism was a lie. Everything they told about to us about capitalism is absolute truth. And there you go. And then you go and begin to look at for example, Lenin, the imperialism as the final stage of capitalism. It's like, my gosh, here it is. It's been all predicted. There you go. You don't want to use Lenin for example, the start revolution, and you cannot start it under modern conditions. And fact is, you reject it because you don't want any kind of revolutions. But then you look at this article, and here it is. Financialization, deindustrialization, and as the result, basically a removal of the real labor, which creates the value from the consideration. And there you go.
Yeah, for sure. And living through you have lived through an economic collapse yourself, like your colleague and my friend Dmitry Orlov, which the Soviet Union had a massive collapse, but it did relatively well considering the size of the country, the complexity of the economy that was obviously mismanaged even before, and yet it managed to keep food production and also some key technological and industrial, which we can see now the results, core knowledge and core practices, which enabled it to restart. Now, unfortunately, I don't see, and you mentioned this in the book as well, we don't see this anymore in the West, except of course, there are always some good knowledge cores and knowledge people, but structurally and macroeconomically, we see service economies, no more production, and we see a lot of import of everything from food to medication. And the COVID crisis showed that we didn't even have freaking aspirin produced in our countries, let alone painkillers, let alone anesthesia and food for a lot of things. We produce corn to make syrup, we produce soya to feed pigs and cows, but everything we have on our day-to-day is imported. So we rely on an economy which we seem, at least I use the we as the West, we seem to, led by America, we seem to destroy it willingly, or at least by ignorance, at least, if you want to be kind to them. But so how do you see this playing out? You describe it very well in your book. You add in your book something that I didn't have in my book, which is the military part. Although I also did predicted that in 2011, I predicted that there would be war with Russia for sure, because America needs the war. I did not expect with China that fast as well.
Well,
why not both at the same time, so that they're sure to... So how do you see this playing out compared to your experience in the former Soviet Union collapsing?
I am on this, it's a fixed position. I'm not changing it, that Europe is America's lunch. You know, you die today while I'll die tomorrow, and Europe will be consumed by the United States unless we have a serious political shift, which I doubt, considering the fact of the imbecilization of the European education and preparation, what's called political elite, if you wish. So there will be some kind of the economically driven turmoil, and as the result, we will see probably regime change, if you wish, or some kind of the political violence, which already happening, really. Plus, it's like today with the issue with France, which, by the way, in the news today, we don't even know the real, they hide real statistics, demographic statistics of France. 10% of Arab population, or give me a break, it's probably now more like 30. France as the nation is basically finished. You know, they don't have...
it's an African country.
It's an African country, exactly. And when you look at this, this is what Europe expects in one way or another. It's not just economic thing, which even when you have this, he is a moron, basically, Mr. Habeck, the economy minister of Germany. He admits that that's it, guys. The liquefied natural gas is not going to do it, not going to do the trick from the United States. And our industry this year and starting next year, industry, I'm talking about productive things, will grind to a halt at the best. In the worst, it will disintegrate. And when you look at this, well, will there be a hungry riots? I do not exclude possibility of that too, especially when you see how they actively annihilate farming in Netherlands, for example. It just, I mean, this is insane. I never saw anything like this in my life. It's absolutely unprecedented. This is just absolutely unprecedented.
Absolutely. What you say is correct in the sense that I study history, of course, as you do. And I look into any empire that willingly starves its own population. You have the famine of the 1930s in the Soviet Union, but at least there was a point to it. There was the idea.
Oh, no, there was no deliberate. It was a combination of factors which drove it.
Yeah, and no one dismantles its own industries. Even when the dying Roman Empire or any empires, they try to keep it going as much as they can. They fail sometimes, but at least they try to keep as much as possible your revenue sources. Here, as you mentioned, a minister, which qualification seems to be a moron, it seems that everyone in the political class sole and unique qualification to get to that job is to be a moron. And what happened? We used to be, you know, I'm a bit younger than you, but I used to remember very well the 70s and the political elites that we had before in the 60s. You know, we may disagree with what they were doing, but at least they were, you know, competent, or at least they had culture, they had knowledge, they knew what they were doing. Sometimes it fails, but they knew they were people which you could at least respect in terms of. Now this has completely gone. They are childish, they are ideological, but not even ideological. I don't even dare to call them ideological. They just don't understand what they're doing. They're just children 4 years old with emotion of 4 or 5 years old and doing capricious things and the orders of even more capricious people in Washington, D.C. and New York. What has led to this in your experience, in your opinion?
First, total mythology on the part of the United States about its role in the world in the 20th century. They still pushing this. Even Colonel McGregor pushes this narrative that without United States, Soviet Union wouldn't have defeated the Axis forces, which is absolutely not true. Obviously, the Western allies helped, no doubt about it. And by the way, he still believes that United States made a gift to Soviet Union in terms of the Lend-Lease. Well, Russia made the last payment on that in 2006. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't free.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, they believe this. And when you begin to those things to permeate the whole educational system, especially the humanities education and especially economics education, what are you going to get? You cannot build the castle on the sand. You just can't. And as the result, you have people who are brought up and educated, quote unquote, it's not educated, they are brainwashed in complete mythology. And there you go.
Yeah, you have a big chapter on Western elites in of course, your book. You mentioned how they have a big confirmation bias, which this is quite common in elites.
Yeah, it is.
Throughout. But as you start your chapter, I remember that incompetent bunglers at the helm. And you know what strikes me is that, as again, when I was a kid, universities were, especially American university, were considered the best of the best in the world. And indeed, they did bring supply chain, zero, all these Kaizen, these Japanese concepts, they actually came from America by people like Peter Drucker and the Austrian School of Economics and all that. All of this seems to have been. So what happened to the education system? You live in America, you probably witnessed it.
It was dumbed down completely because it was denied of the real reasoning and rational analysis. It was completely denied. It was, today, if you have a humanities degree, make no mistake, Ivy League today still provides a very decent education in terms of the medical schools or even STEM. But practically any humanities, let alone government or political science, apart from the fact they are fraud sciences, they're not really sciences. Anybody with their IQ above room temperature and doing their due diligence, they will know the foreign relations thing, let alone journalist schools. It's altogether pathetic. It could serve today as the disqualifying factor. They are indoctrinated. They do not know the history. How can you build appropriate or rational line of thought when basically most of what you believe and know is fake? It's myth. Again, army which worships General Patton as a great tank commander, who obviously never studied his Lorraine campaign or how he got stuck at Metz and how he ran out of fuel. Army which worships that kind of guy, it's not going to be a good army, And that's as simple as that. When you believe that America won, with some help of those Ruskies, defeated Nazi Germany, they never even encountered any first-rate Wehrmacht generals to start with, except for Model, who actually basically abdicated himself during the Bulge, And when you look at this, it's like, my gosh, it's fake. Most of it is fake.
The economy, the knowledge, the education. Look, I remember in the early 90s, in many countries, I remember in New York for sure, a taxi driver who immigrated from Russia who had PhD in physics.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to have this in the West.
No.
Because first of all, there's not many PhD in physics anymore. But also...
most of them are Chinese. I'm not kidding you. Up to 80% of PhD in physics in the United States are Chinese origin.
Yeah, for sure. Korean, Chinese. We saw this many years ago. Yeah. We saw the shift already in the 80s. But how do you recover from what is going to happen? Because you mentioned the complete change of the elites, which elites are known for at least one thing. They don't like to be removed from
Yeah,
the place. And where do you start from? How can we prepare now for the change that is happening to restart something better?
In Europe, they might get some sense of their national identity. It starts with that. And we have to be very clear about it and what defines the combined West. And combined West is the inventor of the nation states, but it's more than just the, as Kareli Barnett, or the collection of the atomic, individuals unified under the some set of laws. It is ethnic, cultural, social, language, what have you, blood identity of people, and you have to regain it. The same as Russians regained it. Well, they always had it. They try to destroy it. But even if you read Russian constitution, it contains some clause about that the main language of the Russian Federation is the Russian language, the language of the founding people of the country. Who are the founding people? 80% of them are Russians. Russians obviously are very diverse and multi-ethnic, multi-religious society, but Russia has this 80% core of those Russians who are Russian in culture, outlook, and life, by blood, by ethnicity. And, and that is why, because you have such a strong core, you can always adopt and invite people, and those people, they join in. This is not the case in the Western world today, and especially in the United States, which is we have the complete and concerted effort to undermine everything what have been, notwithstanding the obvious facts of the, for example, crimes committed by the initial settlers against the native people. Nobody argues with that. And there's no doubt about the basically issues of slavery and things of this nature. But America, for all its flaws, was built around by primarily European core, and the denying of this fact, it's not going to end up well, and it's not ending up well. But will this core regain any kind of the national identity? I have doubts about it. And again, the only thing which came close to actual nation, granted, it has a lot of flaws on its own, was the American South. But obviously, even that is being washed out. And the question is not only the minorities, and you would expect the minorities, to be around. It's the fact that the core of American civilization today rejects pretty much European origins of its founders. And they have the revision of it. It doesn't mean that it was all, peachy and fine and dandy. No, many crimes have been committed, genocide have been committed. But again, people who live today, they have nothing to do with that in the past. It doesn't mean that you have to, it's like, remember Stalin, famous Stalin, 1945. Hitler's come and go, Germany remains. That's the same thing. But no, this is not what they're doing in the United States. And they are trying to destroy the core.
Now, there's two things that could be interesting. First of all, we mentioned that France has probably 30% of its population, which is from North African or African origin right now, and this is about the proportion. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but in Russia there is about 20-30% of.
No, it's not 30. It's more like 18-20.
Who is from Caucasus, from Central Asia.
Yeah, all of them, including Tatars and Bashkirs, who are enclaves of the. So, in this respect, we're looking at 18-20.
Yeah, so a significant proportion.
Significant, yes.
And it seems to be not problematic at all. I'm sure there are little problems right now. It was more problematic before, for sure. Why or how can a country like Russia manages this kind of diversity, whereas in the West, we are completely unable to even name whatever problem it could cause, and certainly not even trying to even handle it? What's the difference in management style?
The Russians when they have been building their empire, well, obviously it wasn't there also a humanistic project, to put it mildly. There were some issues, but traditionally Russians would come to local population, so to speak, and they say, who are you? I say, oh, we're Muslims. Okay, just keep your Muslim faith, and do as you need to do. But here are the state laws. And of course, state laws have been created by the core. And guess what? If you don't accept them, well, too bad, But in the end, there was never doubt that you would discriminate against them. And in fact, Bolsheviks went other way around, completely 180 degrees or 360 degrees, as Annalena Baerbock says. That actually they basically were sacrificing Russian people, Slavic core of Russia, towards the development of those fringes. For example, like modern stans, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and things like that. But people who lived in Russia proper traditionally, they are totally incorporated. They are given same opportunities like everybody else. Absolutely, same set of laws, with sometimes some twist, and that is why you get, for example, look at Tatars, for example. Truckload of scientists, first-rate scientists, artists, managers, military people. So when you look at this, Susan Eisenhower have been married to Roald Sagdeyev, who was one of the chiefs of the Soviet space program. So, and he's Tatar, and the point is that they are given all the same rights, but they are also, demand to them is the same as from any other citizens of Russian Federation. And there is a clear understanding, as I already stated, in Constitution, Russians are stated as the founding people of Russia. They are equal, they are, how to say it, first among equals.
I understand. Another difference is, let's say, the willingness of minorities to lobby and succeed in lobbying their way through power. And as the United States and many other Western countries are disintegrating, we may end up with like the LGBT Republic of the Potomac or of the Bay Area or whatever, or we'll find New Africa in some parts of the country.
Oh, they tried to do this before, actually.
In the 70s. And of course, we'll have Nuevo Mexico in lots of towns and parts of the country. I like Mexican people, but we don't see this in Russia. There's no way there is a LGBT community of the Neva, Republic of the Neva. That's not going to happen. So, and yet, when I travel to Russia, I don't feel there is, military and police people in the street beating you up and checking if you are of such and such a faith or minority or behavior. It's very laissez-faire. In fact, it's quite easy. Of course, I'm not very much concerned by a lot of things. However, I know some people who are, and they live very well in Russia. And again, what's the difference of management style, in your opinion?
I'll give you an example, Chechnya, for example. Okay? First, very few people talk about the grandiose triumph of this management, because Chechnya not only is peaceful, but actually, if you look attentively, look at Ramzan Kadyrov, who understood that you can gain more by being with Russia, and Chechens understood that. And so guess what? They are building, and it's already kind of in advanced stage, a very serious tourist infrastructure in Chechnya. In fact, is one of the safest places today is in Russia. Guess where it is? In Chechnya, So this is how it happens. And there was a very fundamental thing which many people don't understand. During the siege of Mariupol, while Russian army was taking Mariupol last year, there were, of course, many civilians hostages, or basically a life shield, behind which the armed forces of Ukraine and those Nazi battalions were hiding. And there was this moment, which was also documented and shown. And when the family of some Mariupol residents, who are, of course, Slavic, Ukrainians, were sitting basically in the cellar, being essentially thrown there by the Azov, Nazis who have been occupying their apartment block and used it as the firing position. And then they obviously, Kadyrov guys, broke through and they say we sit, and then suddenly we hear like Allahu Akbar, and they say, "Thank God, our guy." Just, oh God, our guys there, it's and you can see it. It's on the all. This is, people don't even understand profundity of this, And when this Chechen guy, he grabs this, the child, and kisses, the child and covers with his body, to getting them out of this cellar. So this is everything you need to know.
Yeah, and for people who may be too young to remember, was it 1994, the first war in Chechnya between Russia and the Chechen separatists, let's say. It was brutal, it was difficult, and yet today it looks like maybe it's like a feudal system, but they are like best friends. In fact, for the little story, on my car, I have a sticker of the flag of Chechnya, so that no one dares to touch my car.
Well, yeah. And now they some of the Ahmad, well, it's more like brigade, actually, more than that, actually. Ahmad people are now guarding, also helping guard the border in Belgorod. So, and people say, "Hey, good, our guys are here. They know their business." Yeah, this is like dramatic change in 20 years. It's so unbelievable. It's like, I need to pinch myself what is happening. The speed, the velocity of change is unprecedented.
Yeah, maybe it's also a generational thing. In my generation, we are very, we made difference between people, and as we would say, we are. I understand this. We're happy to be having on our side the Chechens for fighting war. We are happy to have on our side the Jewish lawyers to fight legal wars. We have this acknowledgement of the skills of minorities and people, and this leads to friendship and also, humor and having fun. It seems to me, and I witnessed this working in California in the mid-90s, that there was a climate that started in California where you could not joke, you could not say anything about anyone. You had to be a non-playing character without substance, without relief in French it would be without shades and good and bad things in your character. You had to be completely flat and boring, and the political correctness out of this has killed everything, and it showed for what it is now. It's a way for the ruthless leaders of minorities, and the minorities are not even in the thing. It's really these ruthless rulers who use all of this to take power, like Bolsheviks of the time, in a way. And it's a disaster, because then, of course, there will be, backlash on the minorities when chaos happens, and it's sad.
Well, before Michael Houellebecq, which, by the way, he plagiarized, he stole it, the idea from Elena Chudinova, who wrote in 2005 the novel, which is called The Mosque of the Notre Dame. And she was writing, it became bestseller, and Lefebvrists, even in France, they were standing in front of the Notre Dame de Paris reading the chapters from this book. It's now finally translated into English too. You can buy it, And it was about the fate of France and what is happening to it. Obviously, Michael Houellebecq wrote his Submission basically 10 years later, but let me put it this way. He wasn't original, and because he stole the whole premise from Elena Chudinova, who was 10 years earlier than him. And of course, you know what, it's still all the same. Who cares about about this professor from Sorbonne who likes to screw young girls, and evidently he wants his comfortable life to continue.
It's very normal. It's very normal for professors of the Sorbonne.
Yeah, and he accepts Islam. If that's what it is, and then again, do not forget, we forget completely what was happening already. In '68, for example, it was about screwing girls in the end. It's the leaders of this movement. Many of them were pedophiles, and the next step for the next step for a European elite is the basically legalization of the pedophilia. This is what is happening. And this is the red line. Once you go there, civilization stops. It just disintegrates completely. And the people who are still are afraid and they cannot say things about it. But again, France is leading the way. They are there, you know. And then, of course, Germany. And Germany was always, you know, we look at the whole host of the social and cultural issues. At least in the United States, if you are a pedophile, you do not live long in the, you know, in the jail. And plus, you know what, we have guns here, you know, and no matter how they try, they cannot take them away. In Europe, it's not the case, you know, and when you look at this, yes, so they probably calculated really well what is going to happen to Europe, and they prepared the European elite. Most of those people, like Annalena Baerbock, nobody knows in what her education, but she went through the programs in the United States for the preparation of the future leaders. You know, so there you go.
Yeah, almost all of them did. So a purge of the elite and of the ruling class is overdue if you think, and that's a big if you think that we can recover. And I think that we both agree that there's a good chance that there's no recovery, that there's going to be a long chaos, like the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages followed the fall of Rome in the West, and then there was through the lower Middle Ages a renewal. And in fact, you know, the time of the Crusades and all that were very, very, very developed in Europe again. But there was maybe 300 or 400 years were really, really bad, really difficult.
Well, we live in the informational world, so that process should take much shorter time.
Exactly.
Because of the speed of the information. So, but it's certainly possible, but it will be, I don't know, we need to see what happens in Europe. If it dies out completely, you know, and which is definitely possible. Or maybe there will be some last gasp, you know, the attempt at the resistance. So who knows?
So I remind everybody to get and read Disintegration, Indication of the Coming American Collapse by Andrei Martyanov. It's a very, very good book. A lot of facts, a lot of references. It's not just an opinion book, it's a research. So I encourage you. And of course, to finish, I cannot resist. We've witnesses like if we listen to the media, to the Second Battle of Kursk, to the biggest offensive ever. And as you and I are readers of Robert Glantz, and of course you can read the original material in Russian, and you studied this in the Officers Academy. This is the most ridiculous comparison.
Yeah,
ever.
I mean, it's just no. It's
the only correct comparison is that this is an offensive that leads nowhere.
Nowhere, yeah.
But at least the Germans had a plan that was, in theory, made sense, but there was no way to
and they almost got it, you know, because and again, do not forget who have been at that time those Germans. Walter Model name alone speaks, you know, and when you look at the forces they accumulated, it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, it was 3,600 tanks on the German side and over 6,000 on the Soviet side, like 1 million Germans attacking 1.5 million Soviets.
Yeah,
it's a different scale. It's a different scale.
Unbelievable. But then again, listen, they don't teach this anymore, evidently, in U.S. military academies and war colleges. They study probably I don't know what they study. But then again, we saw what happens in Afghanistan. So, you know, and I already stated, I am now officially, my official position after so many years that I'm beginning to state that much of Pentagon are incompetent people who do not understand what modern war is. So what can I say?
Yeah. of course, on the Russian side today, I've interviewed last week a person living in Moscow, and he was like many people who would like to. And I am very sad to see all these young people dead.
Oh, absolutely.
Ukrainian, Russians, whoever they are, young and old, and civilians and soldiers alike. All of this was unnecessary, unfortunately. But sometimes wars are led by people who don't fight them. So that's what happened. And certainly the mood that was coming from him and his friends in Moscow and the people I know there was like, okay, what are we waiting to finish this thing? And probably there is a reason for they're not idiots. There's a reason why you want to save personnel, you want to minimize the losses, and don't do brash offensive that would be costly. However, what's your we're not prophets, we don't have crystal ball, but how do you see the next months playing out? As we know, any offensive operations have to, if any, they have to happen with the good conditions of terrain and superiority and so on.
Geography, climate, weather and things of this nature. My response to this is always the same. We don't know what and who briefs Mr. Putin every morning. Rather, we know who briefs it, but what is being stated there, we have no clue. Obviously, he and the Russia Security Council and General Staff are the only ones who have the fullness of the information, and they plan accordingly. But basically, there was this mentioning by Putin 3 days ago that in effect the demilitarization of Ukraine is over, which is true, because everything now Ukraine has is being shipped from the West. And that actually begins to bear on the planning, which I think so will end up, which they spoke, Peskov, Medvedev, cordon sanitaire, and that will be cordon sanitaire, which will stretch towards Odessa. And that will be also the bridge to Transnistria. Yeah. And that's what is in plans. That's, I think, so what we are waiting for. Until there is a behind the scene, all kinds of the last time arrangements are being done diplomatically and from the point of view of the what is called human intel and things of this nature.
Yeah, I would imagine. Perhaps to finish this offensive that we've seen, which looks like a reconnaissance in force, not really an offensive, but maybe there's no means to do more than that.
There's no means. That's
exactly. Sounds like it's like attacking a superior enemy in fortified places with disorganized people with different training. People have trained in Germany, people have trained so no coordination, young recruits, old recruits, not the best of the best, unfortunately for them, and at the same time against aerial superiority. And I hear journalists saying, wow, the Russian forces have attacked helicopters. And it's like, well, don't you even read Wikipedia? This is even more sad that it looks like a banzai offensive, like the Japanese would do when they were desperate.
Well, it was pushed on them by the White House and London, and it was pushed precisely because they are incompetent militarily, including those people who advise them. Just to give you an example, what David Petraeus, who never won anything in his life, they lost every single war they fought. And they lost it to the people with the sandals, AK-47s, and RPG-7s. And so when these guys think that they can outsmart Russian general staff, they definitely do not understand military history. And Russian military history dwarfs that of the United States. And it's not just history, it's the school of thought. And evidently those people do not understand. As my friend Alexander Rogers says, they don't have strategy. They have business plan, and this is absolutely true. There is no strategic planning there. They don't understand what it is. They have no clue what it is, because it is all tied to the political winds of the election campaigns. And while many people have to talk about this foreign policy consensus in the United States. And who created this consensus? A bunch of uneducated, uncultured morons with PhDs in something. Look at the Council on the Foreign Relations. It's laughable. Top, bottom, those people have no clue, basically. None of them. It's ridiculous. Look at the U.S. diplomacy. It's the butt of the jokes around the world. Yeah. And we're talking, again, totally incompetent people. I'm looking now at American generals who are doing their media runs. My gosh, in Russia, they wouldn't be allowed to command a battalion, for crying out loud. That's how unprepared they are. And then, of course, yeah, you have the media class, which is, as I already stated, I don't want to insult whores comparing them to them, because whores, yeah, at least they present their valuable service for the money. You get what you see is what you get. But here, I don't even know how to talk to those people. And you're absolutely right. They're children. They're children. They're petulant children.
And again, I think, you know, it's important to say I'm really sad for the dead and the families of the dead, because in Europe we see so many of us Europeans dead now in this country. And also one thing that you mentioned in one of your videos, and again, I encourage people to listen here to subscribe to your channel on YouTube, but also on your Patreon. I am a subscriber of your Patreon, and there's always good information. Also, it's something that even struck, I must say myself, is that the equipment of the West, well, there's either the equipment that is very good quality but used completely in the wrong, not in the situation it was designed for. For example, Leopard 1. Of course, it's obsolete design today.
Well, their Leopard 2s are
Leopard 2 are good, yeah, but they were supposed to be a defensive tank in the Cold War, not for this kind of approach. But also the very poor performance of a lot of Western equipment. We don't even have to mention the Patriots, which was a very bad design from the start. But so many tools and equipment and weapons are not performing well against, you know, a modern army, and this is shattering a lot of people who observe this. Will be surprised by how bad a lot of Western equipment is, in fact.
Well, I wrote in the first book, Russian weapons are created to kill. Okay, a lot of weapons from the United States and Western Europe are designed to be sold. And it's all about the profits. And the question is not only the tactics or anything, but I am on record, and I tell people now, if you want to quote me, refer to me, and if people who want to challenge me, I would gladly, you know, join it. And just to give you an example, we spoke with Theodore Postol at some point of time. There was an exchange. He was talking about, oh, what's the deal with those, you know, and it was like half a year ago. What's the deal with those, you know, early warning, you know, system for the missile launches against, oh, they don't have those satellites and things like that. I said, who told you that they don't have? Look at this. There are already 6 of them already then were flying the Kupol satellites, apart from the other satellites. And then I sent him their comparison of their anti-ballistic missile radar. Russian radar, which is over the horizon, you know, obviously 6,000 kilometer range. I mean, American equivalent is not even in the same league in terms of the accuracy and in terms of developing basically firing solution for the anti-ballistic missiles. And you look at this, and it's like Russians trade war seriously, because out of 1,200 years of Russia as people and, you know, historic Russia, 800 have been spent in war.
Sure.
There you go. So what are you gonna do? You become good at it, you know.
So once again, thank you very much. Perhaps the very last question, which is not related to either your book or what we do, is I wonder if you have news or not about our mutual friend Gonzalo Lira.
No, sadly no. And there's very little I can do to even get anything about him. Sadly.
Maybe encourage people to connect with the Chilean embassies of their country and maybe do some petition and some lobbying so that he can be...
Including in America, senators and congressmen, absolutely write to them. They have to.
Very well. Andrei, I thank you very much for your time. I remind everyone to get and read Disintegration, Indication of the Coming American Collapse. I can still read. I need glasses. Anyway, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Let's continue to listen to your shows on YouTube and on Patreon.
Okay, thank you.